politics, protests, human rights, justice, equity, community. RaceAware. What's up, everybody, and welcome to RaceAware, the podcast all about American race history and its overall impact on the lives of the marginalized. I'm Dr. Elise Richey, coming to you with my co-hosts Tony Szynski and Dan Sauber. Let's get started.
Well, many people are familiar with the McCarthy hearings in the 1950s in Washington, D.C. Not many are aware of the Johns Committee in Florida. How did we get to McCarthyism in the Johns Committee? Strap in for a frightening tale that won't seem out of place today. Following the surrender of Nazi Germany in May of 1945, near the close of the end of World War II, the uneasy wartime alliance between the United States and Great Britain on the one hand, and the Soviet Union on the other, began to unravel. By 1948, the Soviets had installed left-wing governments in the countries of Eastern Europe that had been liberated by the Red Army. The Americans and the British feared the permanent Soviet domination of Eastern Europe and the threat of Soviet-influenced communist parties coming to power in the democracies of Western Europe. The Cold War reached its peak in 1948 and lasted to 1953. In this period, the Soviets unsuccessfully blockaded the western hill sectors of West Berlin, 1948 and 1949. The United States and its European allies formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a unified military command to resist the Soviet presence in Europe in 1949. The Soviets exploded their first atomic warhead, thus ending the American monopoly on the atomic bomb in 1949. And the Chinese Communists came to power in mainland China, also in 1949. And then the Soviet-supported Communist government of North Korea invaded U.S.-supported South Korea in 1950, setting off an indecisive Korean War that lasted until 1953. By this point, communism was as bad could be. On the national level, anti-communist crusader Senator Joseph R. McCarthy of Wisconsin stepped into national prominence on February 9, 1950, when he mounted an attack on President Truman's foreign policy agenda. By 1953, Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy had become one of America's best-known politicians through his campaigns to uncover subversives in government operations. His attacks on the U.S. Army in the fall of 1953 led to the first televised hearings in U.S. history, the Army McCarthy hearings of 1954. In Florida, the Florida Legislative Investigative Committee, commonly known as the Johns Committee, was established by the Florida legislature in 1956 during the era of the Second Red Scare and the Lavender Scare. Like the more famous anti-communist investigative committees of the McCarthy period in the U.S. Congress, the Florida Committee undertook a wide-ranging investigation of allegedly subversive activities by academics, civil rights movement groups, especially the NAACP, and suspected communist organizations. Finding no communist ties to Florida civil rights organizations, their funding was about to be cut. To gain continued funding, we began to focus on a more vulnerable target, homosexuals, who at the time were widely believed to be a threat to national security, as well as a threat to youth. Students and faculty were fired or forced to resign from Florida universities, especially the University of Florida in Gainesville. Charlie Eugene Johns was an American politician. Johns, a Baptist, served as the 32nd governor of Florida from 1953 to 1955. Charlie Johns was born in Stark, Florida on February 27, 1905. He worked as a railroad conductor and insurance agent before being elected to the state Senate as a Democrat in 1947. Johns became the Senate President in April of 1953. a position Markley Johns, his brother, had been elected to. Johns was a member of the Pork Chop Gang, a group of 20 conservative legislators from North Florida who favored racial segregation and consolidated political power and money in the northern, more rural parts of the state. One of Charlie Johns' most remembered initiatives during his early state Senate years was to build a new, portable electric chair to be transported by truck with an electric generator and set up in a jail or courthouse where the convicted was sentenced. Johns is most remembered for his support and chairmanship of the infamous Florida Legislative Investigation Committee, also known as the Johns Committee, because of his chairmanship. When no communists were found by the Johns Committee, they then focused their search on homosexuals, hence the name the Lavender Scare. Intellectuals have always been a problem for many authoritarian leaders, so they naturally turned to the halls of higher education, namely universities, and they started investigating the students and faculty of Florida's university system. They were responsible for revoking teacher certificates and firing university professors. By 1963, the committee had forced the dismissal or resignation of over 100 professors and deans at the University of Florida, Florida State University, and the University of South Florida. One professor, Sigmund Dietrich, chair of the Geography Department at the University of Florida, attempted suicide after being investigated by the committee. The state legislature ended funding for the committee in 1964 after it released a report called Homosexuality and Citizenship in Florida, which infamously became known as the Purple Pamphlet. Its many photographs depicting homosexual acts outraged legislators, and reportedly copies of the report were being sold as pornography in New York City. Charlie Eugenes died on January 23, 1990, at the age of 84. While the Johns Committee died in 1964, Florida roared back into the news in 1977 with Anita Bryant and her Save Our Children campaign, showing how easy it is to always strike out at marginalized communities. One would have thought Florida would have learned its lesson in either 1964 or 1977, but Florida continues to make news to this very day.